Welcome to the Brazil Expat Journal, the BJ you can trust. My name's Phil, and I'll be your guide as we explore South America's biggest country. So thanks everyone who subscribed to the channel and shown your support. Don't forget to click on the links below to see what other goodies I have for you on my Patreon page. If you're new to the family, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know when new episodes are up. I'm so excited for today's BJ because I'll be talking to Shelly Bhoil. She's an Indian Tibetologist and poet living in Brazil. She's the author of the 2016 book An Ember from Her Pyre and was co-editor on Tibetan Subjectivities on the Global Stage, which was published in 2018. She's also the editor on some forthcoming works such as New Narratives of Exiled Tibet and Tibetan Exile Poetry in partnership with the University of São Paulo. And finally, her own book of poetry, Preposição de Entendimento, will be published very soon. Unfortunately, due to the current pandemic, many things had to be pushed back. We'll talk about her experience in Brazil as an Indian woman and mother. She'll read some of her own work, as well as a poem by a Tibetan exiled poet and activist, Tenzin Tsundue. And of course, we'll have the Expat Quiz at the end. And since we have a little bit of a poetry reading on this episode, look on the screen and you'll be able to follow along with the poem that she is reading. So I hope you really enjoy that. But before any of that, some news. On today's news segment, there's really only one story worth talking about, which is the fact that President Bolsonaro, who had downplayed the COVID-19 crisis for so long, actually contracted the disease this past week, and the fact that he cured himself using hydrochloroquine, which, as we all know, there's a big debate about. This, of course, has only caused more of a rift between the left wing and the right wing, and it seems like everybody's more interested in political brownie points than actually doing anything good for the population during this time. So he seems to be well, he seems to be recovered. We shall see what happens moving forward. He's been a bit quiet, especially after all the stuff that was going on with his sons. So we'll see what he has to say about that in the coming weeks. But that's basically the big news here in Brazil, other than that in some places like São Paulo, where I live, the country has begun opening up a little bit more. For example, I had lunch at a restaurant down the street, which is allowing people to actually sit in the restaurant. They're not serving buffet style food, but they'll make it in the kitchen and they'll serve you. So we see that slowly but surely things are shifting back to a level of normalcy. We'll see how long it lasts. We'll see if cases start spiking after people become a bit more socially active and start going out more. We don't know. We are such a moment of we don't know, but that's what it is. Now guys, let's get to the interview. Don't forget that when Shelley is reading poetry, you can follow along on the screen and you can really get a sense for these poems, and they're so gorgeous. So pay attention, enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. Hello guys, as Murphy's Law would have it, the second that I welcomed Shelley to the show and asked her how she was, a motorcyclist decided that he wanted to rev up his bike. And there was so much noise, you could barely hear anything. So we're picking up right when I asked her, "Hey Shelley, how are you?" And here's her answer.
Hello Phil, I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
I'm so happy to have you on. And Shelley, can I give you an extra special thank you? And I'm going to explain why. Because the last 3 or 4 interviews, I've had to do them early in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. And I'm so excited that I get to interview you at 10 p.m. at night. This is the best part.
I think it suits me as well. So I have to thank you as well for this.
Oh, good. So I think people can notice in my voice that I sound a little bit more awake than some of the other podcasts. But Shelley, I want to begin by asking you, where are you from exactly in India, and how did you end up in Brazil?
Phil, this question is a very troubling question. Where are you from?
Yes.
If I go down to memory lane, when this question was first asked to me when I was in school in a hill station called Shimla, where I was a student and I grew up in Shimla. So in the class, students asked, where are you from? Or teachers asked, where are you from? And I said that I am from a small village, a tiny village of 600 to 800 people called Garli Paragpur in the Himalayas, in the foothills of Himalayas in India. So that was when I was in Shimla. And when I moved to Delhi to teach in Delhi, people asked me, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Shimla. And when I came to Brazil, I said, I'm from Delhi. And I think now I also belong to Brazil.
You became kind of a citizen of the world a little bit.
I think I agree.
Well, but how long did you spend in Delhi before, did you grow, because you said you grew up in a small village, so you only went there to teach afterwards, and so how exactly did you end up in Brazil from Delhi?
Yeah, I was in Delhi for 5 years. I began my career in Delhi as a journalist, and then I became a professor in a university, Delhi University. And after being 5 years in Delhi, I came to Brazil in 2009. So what brought me here was marriage.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, but now I like to believe that my destiny brought me here, just not marriage, because my son was to be born here. My son is a Brazilian, and I was brought here to Brazil.
Very nice. You came the same year that I came in 2009. So your husband was already living here?
Yeah. He was already in Brazil. He was here for 4 years.
Great. And did you come to São Paulo directly? Because I know you live in São Paulo.
Yes. I came directly to São Paulo. And this was my first foreign country I traveled to.
Okay. Well, good. So now that leads me to my next question is, how did you feel when you got to Brazil? What were your first impressions coming to São Paulo?
Honestly speaking, I did not feel very strange in São Paulo as I had expected, because India is a very country which is very multilingual. It's a very big country. Like if I travel to south of India from north, I feel I've come to a world where I don't understand the language the people speak, where the food is different. Sometimes even the clothes are different, the dressing is different. So I felt similar about Brazil, but it really took me some time to understand how Brazil is different from India, or what things are really similar. But initially it was kind of easy for me. It was not very difficult.
What would you say were some of the similarities?
Well, similarities, this anthropologist, Edward Hall, he has popularized a term called high context societies. So Brazil and India are both very high context societies, which means that, these are countries which are very high on who they are. They're very happy about who they are, very proud of themselves. They are very colorful, noisy, quick to promise things, and very quick to complain also, and sometimes very casual in their professional fields, So some similarities that I really feel in the cultures of India and Brazil are like, the festivals, the dance, music, noise, glitter. We have it in Indian festivals. We have it in Brazilian festivals, the Brazilian carnival. Of course, in Brazil, we have women wearing more bold clothes, unlike India, where we have a bit of conservatism. Not everywhere in India, though. The second similarity I felt when I visited Rio de Janeiro, the slums there reminded me of the slums in Mumbai in India. Then I felt that just like, Indians are very hospitable. If you go to an Indian household, they're going to ask you for water, they're going to welcome you. If you're a foreigner in India, sometimes they would help you so much that you will feel that you're adopted, So I felt that we have a similar kind of hospitality in Brazil. Brazilians are very hospitable people. There have been times when I have lost my way and when I didn't speak any Portuguese. So Brazilians have walked kilometers with me to make sure that I reach the right place. They're very, very, very hospitable people, like in India. But Phil, on the other end of this hospitality is also a world of crime, which is again common between India and Brazil, Just like we have very high crime in India, especially in terms of like women's safety, children. We have a very high rate of crime here. You feel unsafe, if you are carrying an expensive mobile or you wearing some gold, you would feel unsafe. In India also you feel unsafe, and one thing that I also find very common about India and Brazil is that Brazil is a very classist society. You have a separate entry door for the domestic help. You have RAG Serviço. You have a different elevator. So in India also we're very classist. We have this kind of class consciousness. We wouldn't really mix up with the lower class, or the higher class would sort of would have that nose really high in the air. And in India, we're also castists, and we have very narrow communal sentiments. So these are some broad similarities that I found in Indian and Brazilian culture when I came here.
I see. Now, let me ask you, in India, do they still have the caste system or not? Or is that done away with?
Oh, of course we have it, I'll tell you very honestly, like when I came to Brazil, we had a very famous soap opera here that is called Caminhos dos Índia, or I think it's called Caminho da Índia.
Yeah, that's soap opera. I remember. Yes.
Yeah, very popular soap opera. So it was like airing its last episode when I came here. So people here, they ask me questions like, "Qual é sua casta? What is your caste?" And this question really perplexed me because nobody asked me this question in India. And I said, "Oh, well, I do not know what my caste is. I never bothered about it." But the fact is that I have not bothered about it because it's a privilege for me. My caste is a privilege for me. But in India, people are very casteist. If it's not a privilege for you, if you do not belong to the caste, which is not considered low, you would sail through. But in India, we do have the caste system. It's very deep rooted, especially in the interiors. People make decisions about marriage on the basis of caste. Not everybody in India, but still many people do that. Sometimes caste, they don't mix up. There's something called scheduled caste, so people do not want to drink the water from the same tap. So this is very unfortunate. But we do have it in India, and it's very strong there, unfortunately.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, in a way, Brazil has its own sort of caste, but it comes from the classist society.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. And what struck you as most different, that took you like the longest to really get used to in Brazil?
Yeah, what is most different? Actually, there are many things that I felt are different between India and Brazil. What I realized that in India we have a lot more language variety than we have in Brazil. In India we have 25 official languages. Wow. And we have more than 700 dialects. When I tell this to people in Brazil, they're like, "Wow, is it?" Most of them are jaw dropped here. This really, how is it possible? But we do have, and every language has its own culture. It has its own food. It has its own dress code. In Brazil, it's a bit too monolithic, the Brazilian identity. I won't say it's totally monolithic because if you go up north, it's very different from here. But the variety is not as much here as much we have in India vis-a-vis language. So that's one very thing that was very different for me. And what I really realized was that, in Brazil, we have a lot more racial variety than we have in India, In India, we have the Aryan, we have the Dravidians, we have people in Northeast. But in Brazil, it's everything is mixed up. It's a pastiche culture. Anybody can be Brazilian, And, here, these people, they say bem-vindo. If you come to Brazil and you live here for a few years and you learn the Brazilian language, you are already a Brazilian. But this doesn't happen in India. The president of the Indian Congress there, Sonia Gandhi, she's an Italian and she married an Indian and her husband passed away in India, and yet people question her foreignness. So this doesn't happen in Brazil. After a few years, people accept you as Brazilians. So this is one difference I found, and this made me feel comfortable in Brazil. The acceptance that people have here, they accept you as you are. They accept you with your flaws. Even if you're speaking very broken Portuguese, they do not mind. They help you. They accept you the way you are.
This is true, and I've heard it so many times with friends of mine who are expats who've been here long enough, and their Brazilian friends, when they introduce them, they say, "Oh no, ela é brasileira." She's a Brazilian. She's been here long enough. She's enjoyed enough churrascos with us that we know she's a brasileira.
Brazilian, true. That's true. That's right.
Yeah. Well, you talked a little bit about language, and I usually like to ask my guests about language. As far as how long did it take you to learn Portuguese?
Phil, it took me a fairly long time to learn Brazilian Portuguese, but that's because of my particular circumstances. When I came to Brazil, I was doing my PhD, And I was so busy studying all the time. So when you write a thesis 12 hours a day in English, you don't have the capacity in you to learn another language. So I took very long time, but I really think I started learning Portuguese after my son was born. With him, I began to socialize, his school and the doctors and friends in the park, and that's how I got to learn more Portuguese.
Oh, and doesn't it upset you how quickly the kids learn? Oh my goodness.
My kid, he corrects my Portuguese because he's born here. The first school he went was a Brazilian school. He sleep talks in Portuguese, so he corrects me. He says, "Mama, this is not your words." His best friend's name is Bernardo. I say Bernardo. He says, "No, mom, say Bernardo."
Oh God, yes. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about him in a minute. Her son, by the way, guys. I taught him English for a little bit, but sometimes I felt he was teaching me. He's incredible. He's an incredible little guy. But we'll talk about him in a little bit. But I want to touch on something a little bit more in depth, I guess, a little bit more controversial, because I do read some of your posts on Facebook, and I know that India still has a lot of challenges when it comes to women's rights. In some moments, when I do read about India, I say, wow, they're so ahead of the rest of the world. And then sometimes I read stuff about India and I say, wow, they're 100 years behind the rest of the world. It's a very interesting dichotomy. And I feel like that about Brazil sometimes too, which is interesting. So how do you feel as a woman living here in Brazil? More on a personal level. We'll get into on a professional level in a little bit, but just on a personal level, how do you feel as a woman living here in Brazil and women's rights in general?
Phil, a lot of people ask me this question, and when some people ask me this question, I sense it that they ask this question because they feel that India is very conservative. Brazil is less conservative, so I must be feeling very liberated here, very free here. But that's not true in my case, because I grew up in a family where we didn't have any gender roles to play. My mom and dad, they both worked, they both earned, they both spoiled each other. So, and also I was financially independent when I came to Brazil, so I felt more liberated there than I feel here. But what you say is very right about women's right in India right now. Though women are doing very well in professional fields, they're doing very well, but it's become a very unsafe place for women. I feel very sad, I feel very painful about this. When I was growing up, it was not like that. I did not really feel the place I grew up. I never felt that I'm vulnerable as a woman. I've never felt weak as a woman, even at home and even in society. The only thing I would ever fear about was animals coming from the jungles if I would have to walk out at night. But I would never fear walking alone as a woman. But now I fear traveling in India alone by myself. I do fear because over the time, I do not know what's gone wrong. We've become a sick society. I think there's a lot of sexual suppression in India, So, it's not a very good term, but India, like especially Delhi, is called the rape capital of the world. And that really makes me feel sad. So in Brazil, that way I do feel safe because I do go out at 11 p.m. I do take sometimes very early morning flights. I travel a lot with my son in Latin America. In India, I feel unsafe, but in Brazil, I feel safe in this way. But if you talk about like feeling more liberated, I felt more liberated there because I had my own career. I was independent. I had my own network, my set of friends and family. Yeah.
This dichotomy is so interesting to me here in Brazil because it's kind of an unspoken one where it's exactly what you said. Like, in some aspects, women are very liberated here as far as, I guess you can say just in a sexual way, in the amount of them just being able to say, I'm a woman, here I am. But at the same time, there's still so many traditional female roles. And you see women still are home, they're taking care of the kids. You don't see as many women in the office, or at least in high positions in offices. So it's something that really, it interests me, but it confuses me at the same time. And even as far as how much the matriarch controls the family here. So almost all the big decisions are coming from the woman as far as where the family is going to go, what decisions to make. And yet it seems like they don't have real power to go out and become the director of a company and things like that. It's very bizarre. It's very
I do not, it really confuses me because if you see, on the other hand, if you look at the gender ratio, we have more women in Brazil than we have men. I think in São Paulo it's 7:1. If you go north, it's 9:1, if I'm right. But yet women do end to take up those traditional roles of nurturing, and men take up the roles of earning the bread. We have this in India also. But it's not like very deep, and it in every household. Like as I give you example of my household, and my parents are like in the 70s now, early 70s.
I get you. Now, you've already mentioned that you have a little boy. So, as a mom here, how has that changed your life? How is raising a child in Brazil? What are the challenges of raising a kid here in Brazil?
I feel really great as a mother, and I feel great as a mother in Brazil. My pregnancy in Brazil was like another honeymoon. I loved it how people treated me, how they cared for me. Sometimes they would want to just sort of touch my belly to feel the baby. It was amazing. I think Brazil is a really good country when it comes to, children and old people. They really take care. And ever since my son is born, I think my life is totally changed because it's all about taking care of him and his needs. The challenge here is as an expat, I don't have family to rely upon, I don't have, I cannot, like in India, if I would have holidays, I would take him to his grandparents, I would take him to his aunts and uncles. But here, I can't take him anywhere. That's a challenge. But the good part of this, this thing is that a problem becomes a potential is that when there are holidays, we travel to places in Latin America. For example, December, I took him to Ushuaia. We went to Patagonia. So that is very beautiful. So what happens is makes my little boy turn into my travel buddy. And it's a whole new exciting level of experiences that I have with my little boy. Because the way he would look at the world is so different from the way we adults would look at the world, and his very innocent and naive questions really make me see and enjoy the beauty of the world. I would say it's beautiful to be a mother. It's beautiful to be a mother, especially in Brazil.
And how is schooling here?
Schooling, well, I think the schooling is it's not very easy here. My son goes to a international school because we are expats and we have to be prepared for a return, though I don't think we are going to return. But if ever there has to be return, we have to be prepared for that. So my son goes to an international school where he learns English. And that school is quite good. That school is really good. But if you look at many other schools here, when I hear from my friends, my Brazilian friends, they have complaints. They say that the schools are a bit lazy. They say that the schools are more into activities and hardcore studies. But at the same time, I think it is not a bad idea because childhood should be about enjoying the world. It should be about, what's the haste to learn to write? What's the haste to see? Every child learns to walk. So if the child learns to walk at the age of 2 or at the age of 3, it doesn't matter. What really matters is that when you enjoy doing this, when you enjoy walking, when you enjoy the activity, that's more important. So I think I like the education here in a certain sense. But what I hear from my some friends who teach in the public schools, the stories are not very nice. They say that there are lack of resources, there are not enough books in the libraries, and that feels a bit sad.
No, this is true. I work in a high school, and it's a private high school, but even still, there's a lot that is lacking, I feel, compared to American public schools, just as far as resources, arts programs, theater programs, sports. It seems like they just kind of teach the kids how to memorize things and not really how to think. Can I ask you, since you've been here, and even with your son or your husband, have you guys ever dealt with any prejudice based on where you're from?
Not really. Yes. I think during my pregnancy, I did feel some kind of prejudice during my delivery. At the time when my son was born, I didn't feel very comfortable with the doctor who was there. I did feel that she was looking down upon my skin. Actually, what happens when people have this prejudice against you? They don't say it in words. It only they show it in gestures. You only feel it. You feel it through the way they look at you. The way they speak at you. So I did feel, but it's very negligible. I wouldn't say that it's something that I would get stuck to and would say that everybody's like that. very, very, very rare, very rare. Most of the people here are very welcoming. But I feel that there is discrimination here, as I mentioned about this country being very classist. I have not really, for example, the place I'm living, the condominium I'm living in, we have 300 apartments here. But why we have only white people? Why don't we have white people, or we Indians? But why don't we have like the indigenous Brazilians? Or why don't we have African Brazilians here? Or for example, the offices, my husband's office, or the office he used to work at earlier, or many places I go to. It's very rare to find, So I think there is this kind of racial prejudice in the society here. There must be to some extent, yes.
Okay. Well, speaking now about your life on a professional level, okay, because we did mention at the beginning of the show that you are a poet and a scholar. So can you go a little bit more in detail about that? What is it exactly that you do?
Yeah. So, Phil, I am a poet. So my book of poems is coming in Brazil this year. It's selected by a publisher called Uratau. It was supposed to publish now, but because of pandemic, its publication is delayed. So, but I think by the year end, the book should be ready. I write poetry, and besides poetry, I am a research scholar. I have done my PhD in the area of Tibetan studies. Tibet is something very new to Brazilians here. When I talk about my research area, people say, Tibet, where? And then I have to explain, And then people say, oh, Dalai Lama. Okay, the Dalai Lama's people are Tibetans. Okay, those Tibetans. So I have to really explain that Tibet is a country which is occupied by China, and the Dalai Lama is a refugee. So I do my research, and I have done my research. I've done my PhD while living in Brazil. Most of it I've done through Brazil, and it was quite a challenge because we don't have any resource material here. We had nothing on Tibet here. We have a Tibet house that only came up a few years ago, but at that time when I came here, we had nothing here on Tibet. Even Tibet House, it really works mostly on, on Tibetan religion and the spirituality and the Buddhism.
Where is this Tibet House?
It's in São Paulo. It's very close to Paulista.
Okay,
Avenue
that's
Paulista.
Nice. I'll try to link that in the comments.
It's a very interesting place, and they have very interesting programs. You must visit this place. So, it was quite a challenge to work from here, but thanks to internet, that I could really have access to people in India, everywhere, because the exiles are everywhere. We didn't have Tibetan exiles in Latin America and Brazil, but they're everywhere else in the world, and you can reach them through internet. So I did that. So what I'm doing right now in this area of research is that I am bringing Tibet to Brazil through two projects. They're poetry projects. The first project that I'm doing, it's going to be with the University of São Paulo. I'm going to bring a special edition of Tibetan exile poetry. The focus is going to be on exile. It's going to be in translation, in Brazilian Portuguese translation. So I have a team of translators who are working on this project with me. And the second project that I would be working with, and I'm talking to a publisher right now about this project. It is again Tibetan poetry, but it includes classical as well as contemporary poetry, and this is scheduled for next year. So my idea is to bring, Brazil is very high on poetry and very high in music, art, literature, poetry. So I want to bring the story of Tibet to Brazil through Tibetan poetry. That's what I'm doing now. In fact, I have some translations already done, and the Tibet House is actually also webcasting some of the Tibetan poems. And if you like, I can read out one of the poems to you.
I'm going to ask you to read, but also if you could send me that video again of that lady reading the Tibetan poetry, even though it's in Portuguese, but I think it's nice to share because it was very beautiful. I want you to read some Tibetan poetry, but before you do that, I want to ask you to get into a little bit of your own poetry.
Sure.
Because I know you had sent me a very beautiful poem on Facebook. So I want to get into some of your own poetry, and then we can do the Tibetan poetry too. But before you read, I want to ask you, how is it that you incorporate your Indian and your Brazilian sides, I guess, because you've been here long enough that você é brasileira.
Sim, eu concordo totalmente.
Yeah, so how do you incorporate your Indian and your Brazilian side into your poetry?
Phil, I will actually read my poem. I will let my poem tell you this, okay? You will see in this poem that I talk about a Brazilian song that is colonizing me, that I'm not able to really adapt to. And by the end of this poem, I'm going to translate that song. So you will see that how something that was colonizing my tongue has actually become very translatable for me. So through that poem, I like to tell you about how I incorporate the two.
And then
Phil,
after, can you read the one that you said you had about your son? Because I know you said...
Yes, sure.
So we're going to have a
Definitely.
double feature, guys.
Yeah, all right. So, this poem is called Masala Chai in Brazil. Masala chai, if you know, masala is spicy and chai is tea. It's a black tea that we have, and in which we put masala, we put all the many other things. Masala chai in Brazil. My kitchen is a little India, is an island invaded by aromatic waves of roasted coffee beans riding on strums of guitar played on my neighbor's radio in Brazil. A vida vem inondas como o mar, colonizing me from a tongue root tension to begin with at AMs and PMs every day. I take refuge in my masala chai that tickles the Indianness on my tongue and brings in the Lata or the Mukesh. Kahin doore jab din dhal jaye, between the slow slurp from a Chinese mug, Sanj ki dulhan, reflection of the setting sun thrown into the golden tinge of turmeric stewed with tea leaves, chupke se aaye, stealing between my mother's secret condiments and the divine basil she watered each day by the waking eye of the sky, clad in a sari like Asha Parekh in the song Main Tulsi Teri, often hummed in our fragrant courtyard until time fell us all apart. A dried leaf or two I pick up and brew in my tea every day at AMs and PMs, sometimes over long distant calls on long dead phone numbers, ringing into deep sips from a mug of masala chai that keeps me warm, like the fur of my mother's embrace on cold days and nights, flipping over and over on my isolated island, a little India, invaded by aromatic waves of roasted coffee beans, riding on strums of guitar, a vida vem ondas como mar. Life comes in waves like it were the sea, played on my neighbor's radio in Brazil.
I love this. I only read this I guess now it's more than a few minutes ago. Can you just explain a little bit for the audience what gave you the inspiration for this poem?
Actually, I was asked to write this poem for an international literary festival. So they asked me to fuse my Indian experience of being an Indian in Brazil and something to do with tea. And in Brazil we have a coffee culture, and in India we have a tea culture.
Yes.
So I have to have a cup of tea in the morning and in the evening, and Brazilians have to have shots of coffee in the morning and throughout the day. So the mix of the tea and the coffee was a bit difficult for me, when I came here. But then with time, as I have given myself, I have accepted this place as my place, and people have accepted me as a part of their culture. I think it's become a beautiful mix for me, these two things. So I used to feel very isolated in the beginning here, but now I don't feel so. I know that if I need something, I can go to the street and I can say, "Socorro, help me," and everybody will come to help me. So I got inspired to write this poem to tell how beautiful I feel about being Indian in Brazil, and how beautiful I feel about, having a taste for both coffee and tea.
I know, I love how you break into the songs, both Brazilian and Indian. But the first line is great. My kitchen is a little India, is an island. And I think most expats can relate to that, because sometimes our house becomes this little island where we can keep a little bit of our own culture in our heart, because you have to. It's not a wrong thing to do. But you have the invasion. I like that you use the word invasion, but it's a sweet invasion. It depends. Sometimes it's not when you have that loud funk music playing. But other times it's this sweet invasion of the noises of Brazil, of the smells of Brazil, that you're trying to create that island for yourself, but it's really no man is an island, right? So, or woman.
Right.
So that's great.
I would say that the waves are so aromatic and the coffee beans are so tempting, that you just can't, keep it at distance. What happens, like when we go to foreign country, we take with us our bodies, we take with our mindsets, we take with us our language, and we become more, we feel most insecure about losing our identity in a foreign country, and this is what keeps us closed. This is what makes us feel isolated, We try to build our own like mini Indias, mini Chinas, mini this thing, which is important. But the sense of insecurity is not important now, So once we sort of try to get over this sense of insecurity, then we are more comfortable, then we can inhabit both the cultures equally well. That is what I have done here, over the years.
Very well said. And now I want to hear the poem that you said you wrote about little Amog.
Yeah, my son's name is Amog. I'm so glad that you can pronounce the name well, because people call him Amo. So.
Well, you know why I can pronounce it well? Because he corrected me. Guys, this little guy is too much. Well, how old is he? Is he 6 now?
No, he's 8. He's 8 years old.
Okay, so I think I met him when he was about 6 or 7. And he is an adult in a little boy's body, 100%. He's so adorable, but at the same time, he will cut you down and let you know what's happening and what's not happening. It's great. You got to be strong to deal with him. But I love it. I love kids that are like that. I love people that are like that are objective. They know what they want, and they're not afraid to say it. So keep that spirit alive in him, please, because that's going to...
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you said that.
Do him well as an adult. But go ahead.
Sorry?
I said it's going to serve him well as an adult. It's definitely going to serve him well as an adult. Phil, since I'm very close to my son, and he's also very close to me, I have this fear that, he might grow up into a mama's boy. He's so emotionally dependent on me that sometimes he would ask me, Mama, can I go wash my hands? I say, you don't have to ask me. Just go and wash your hands. You don't have to tell Mama that you're going to wash your hands. But it's sort of, dependency. And I really fear that dependency. I'm trying to make him independent. But sometimes I also fear because, for example, at this time of pandemic, I told my husband that something happens to me, something happens to you. We're living in a foreign country, away from our home. I think it's the poem that I'm going to read now is the poem that I wrote to him because of my fears. And I wrote this poem to him, but actually I also wrote this poem to overcome my own fears, to, have an understanding of life in the bigger picture. So this poem is called Nothing to Fear. There is nothing to fear, my little one. Everything comes around, from water to dust, betrayal to trust. You have to recognize the small alphabet A and distinguish it from the capital A, observing the pressure on the fingers that write. Trace you must, contours on the bark you lean onto, and it will all come to you. Do not look for us when we are not around, for we are the quivering moon upon the night's lake. We are the puppet shadows appearing, disappearing beyond us. We are the trees that long for the roots as much yearn the high sky. Sleep you must, my child, under the warm blanket of his skin, kissing the air deep, and wake up with arms open like sun rays, taking the world in a warm embrace. Wow, I love this. Guys, before you go on, Shelley, I just need to give a message to my audience, because someone had asked me, why don't you have video on your podcast? And it's for reasons like this, guys, because as Shelley was reading, I was over here swooning. I had my eyes closed. It was wonderful. And you don't need to see that live on camera. I was I was swooning over it. That was beautiful. Oh my goodness. Have you read this to him? Well, I don't know if he would understand the complexity of it, but have you read it to him?
I read this to him and he knows the title and he says, when I say, oh, let me read a poem, Mama, please don't read that poem, nothing to fear. He knows the title, but he doesn't understand the poem, not yet.
Yes. Oh, that's really great. Oh, I loved it. So it's so cool how you're able to infuse all of your life into your poetry, and you have so much more to infuse because of all the cultural experience that you've had in these two countries. So it's a really special thing that you have. You know, not everybody can say that.
I agree. Poetry is my drug. It's my drug. It's my medicine. It really makes me feel happy, and I bring to poetry all my emotions, my philosophy, my ideas, the things that I learn, and not as an Indian, not as a Brazilian, not as a woman, not as a mother, but as a human being.
Yes.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, obviously now we're in pandemic mode, but do you participate in poetry readings? Are there any that people can find you or that happen a lot that they can go to?
Yes, I have given a couple of talks on pandemic related to Tibetan pandemic, and I have read a poem for one of the online event. Which I can send the link to you later on.
Yeah, send me links. Any type of poetry readings that we have in São Paulo or anything like that. Send me a link, and I can put it in the description of the video.
Yeah, I would be particularly interested in people reading, other than my poetry, I would be more interested in them reading Tibetan poetry, which is now coming in Brazilian Portuguese, because that's very meaningful. I'm not saying my poetry is not meaningful. My poetry is very meaningful to me. But that poetry, the Tibetan poetry, is very meaningful in the sense of a cause,
Mm-hmm.
See, these are people who are deterritorialized. They have a nation in exile. They you ask them, what's your address? You ask me where you come from. You ask them my address. I'm still confused about it. But look at them. I still have some places to say, okay, this is an ancestral home. I'm living here. I lived here. But look at these people. They're stateless people. They say that our address is stolen. We don't have an address, it's stolen. We are refugees. We are now here, tomorrow we're somewhere else, So I really would want people to read the Tibetan poetry that I'm bringing to Brazil now.
Can you read us some
Oh, yes.
Right now?
Yes, I remember I had this poem in mind. This poem is When It Rains in Dharamshala. Dharamshala is the exiled capital of the Dalai Lama and Tibetans. When they were exiled in 1959, when they were exiled, they came to India and they formed a government in exile in Dharamsala, and there we have the highest concentration of Tibetan exiles. So Dharamshala is actually also the place I come from, like my native town, my native place, the place I was born in. So Dharamshala receives very high rainfall in India. It's very popular for its very high rainfall. It's a very wet place. So this poem is written by a Tibetan exile activist, Tenzin Tsundue. Tenzin Tsundue, if you find about Tenzin Tsundue, he wears a red bandana on his forehead. He says, I'll only take it off when Tibet is free. So when it rains in Dharamsala, and the Tibetan settlement, I must tell you, they are very small houses, very small rooms where people live, because that's when Tibetans came to exile in 1959. They thought that exile was a very temporary arrangement. There were some 80,000 Tibetans who came to exile. So they thought that they would go back to Tibet when political stability will be restored there. But it's been more than 6 decades, and it has become a kind of a permanent exile for Tibetans. So the houses there are very small, and it's about like rainfall in Dharamsala. So I'll just read the poem. When it rains in Dharamsala. When it rains in Dharamsala, raindrops wear boxing gloves. Thousands of them come crashing down and beat my room. Under its tin roof, my room cries from inside and wets my bed, my papers. Sometimes the clever rain comes from behind my room. The treacherous walls lift their heels and allow a small flood into my room. I sit on my island nation bed and watch my country in flood. Notes on freedom, memoirs of my prison days, letters from college friends, crumbs of bread, and Maggi noodles rise sprightly to the surface like a sudden recovery of a forgotten memory. 3 months of torture, monsoon in the needle-leafed pines, Himalaya rinsed clean, glistens in the evening sun, until the rain calms down and stops beating my room. I need to console my tin roof, who has been on duty from the British Raj. This room has sheltered many homeless people, now captured by mongooses and mice, lizards and spiders, and partly rented by me. A rented room for home is a humbling existence. My Kashmiri landlady at 80 cannot return home. We often compete for beauty, Kashmir or Tibet. Every evening I return to my rented room, but I'm not going to die this way. There has got to be some way out of here. I cannot cry like my room. I have cried enough in prisons and in small moments of despair. There has got to be some way out of here. I cannot cry. My room is wet enough.
Oh my God, that's very... Can you just repeat the beginning line about how he describes the rain? Is it like boxing gloves?
Yeah, he says, raindrops wear boxing gloves. Thousands of them come crashing down and beat my
God,
room.
I love this. When was this written, this poetry?
I think it was written because he brought out his first collection in 2002. So it must be written around that time, 2002 or 3.
Wow, so expressive. And you know, we have the perfect backdrop. I don't know if you're part of São Paulo, it's raining or not, but it's raining so hard over here in Butantã.
Oh, in Butantã, I'm in Portuguese. It's just drizzling here.
Is it? It's not raining?
No, it's just drizzling outside.
Oh gosh, guys, just that's so you get an idea, guys, of how big São Paulo is. Because here it's like a thunderstorm. So I've got the perfect backdrop for this poem. As you're reading it, I'm hearing these pitter patter, the boxing gloves hitting across my window. That's a gorgeous poem. When you translated these poems, what is the original language that they use in Tibet?
No, this poem is in English. Tibetans in exile. Yeah, Tibetans in exile. They're writing in English, writing in Tibetan. Okay. Yeah, in Tibetan language and in English. I'm not translating these poems because my Portuguese language, my proficiency is not enough to translate into Portuguese. I can do vice versa. But who's translating are my friends from university, my poet friends. So this poem is translated by Giselle Volkov. It will be put up on Tibet House website very soon, and when it's there, I'll share it with you.
Oh, definitely share any links. As usual, those of you who have listened to this podcast before, you know that I put all the links in the description. In fact, I do have on the screen Shelley's contact information, so if you want to get more information about Tibet, poetry in general. Also, Shelley, make sure that you tell us when it is that your book is going to be published, because you said that, you know, because of the pandemic it was held back. But you can let me know and I'll put it in the description, because I'll publish this video only in maybe a couple weeks, okay?
Okay, it's a great...
Well, I want to move ahead because we've been talking for a little bit, and I do want to get you, you know, I'm sure you need to sleep at some point. But so I'm going to ask you just one thing before we play the Expat Quiz, and it's about, since you've been here, you know, you arrived same year that I did, 2009, and I remember when I got here, there was zero, I mean, maybe one or two Indian things to do, but there weren't that many. And for somebody that came from the U.S., the northeast part of the U.S., New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, we have a lot of Indian influence. I grew up with India in my backyard, basically. So I missed that when I got here. So I want to ask you how you've seen the Indian culture really start to grow in Brazil, and where you feel it's gotten the most influence.
Yeah. You know, Phil, you're quite right. When I came to Brazil, I never bumped into another Indian in the streets. Like, you know, for example, when you go to Canada, you go to US, you keep bumping into Indians at the airport, everywhere. But here it's very rare that you bump into an Indian, you know. So we've had a very little Indian community here. As per Polícia Federal, we have about 10,000 Indians in Brazil, but then it also includes the Shippies. But I would say that there are about 3,000 to 5,000 Indians in Brazil, but many of them are also like floating population. They come here and for work and they go back. In India, in São Paulo itself, where we have the Indian Association of São Paulo, which is a registered NGO, we have about 750 registered members here. And I think the Indian Association has done a lot of work in making our community alive. They have three things in the charter. One is to create platform for the community. One is to promote the Indian culture, and the third is social service. So this platform that they have with the community, because of this platform, we have something called Bloco Bollywood, and we had the 5th edition in 16 of Bloco Bollywood.
I love it.
And we had about 6,000 people. I think you've been to one of the Bloco Bollywoods. You sent me videos, I remember. Yeah. And this time Bloco Bollywood, it had a tribute to Mahatma Gandhi. So I think Bloco Bollywood is one area where we've really got a hype of Indian culture. And we have also a lot of Indian restaurants that have come up in the last 10 years. When I came here and I had the urge to eat samosa or, the very typical Indian food that you don't cook at home, I couldn't find places. There were just a couple of restaurants very far away and they catered mostly to Brazilian taste, so it wasn't spicy enough. But in the last 10 years, we have had a lot of restaurants. A lot of restaurants have mushroomed up, And among this, like Samosa and Company is very popular, and it's really amazing the Indian food that we have here. That's one thing that's happened is very recently, a friend of mine, Florenza Di Costa, who's also the author of the book Os Indianos, In this book, Florenza Di Costa, she has started a website called Bico da India, in which, she talks about like the footprint of Indian culture in Brazil. So even when I came here, India was very popular here because of the soap opera, but it was only popular on TV. But we didn't have like real things happening about India and Brazil culturally, But now we have a lot of things happening because of, the Indian Association, which is kind of an unofficial interface between the consulate, the government, and the community. So Bloco Bollywood is one thing that is a sure hit here,
What was pretty popular too for a few years before the Hollywood was the I think it was the Holly Festival in Ibirapuera. It was it packed,
Yeah, we have the Holy Festival conducted every year. This year, our president Shobhan Saxena, he was very wise enough to cancel this event. We had it on I think 15th or 16th March, but he cancelled it very early on. He said, no, we have to take precaution. We are living in a world of pandemic right now.
Yes.
So he cancelled because against like the idea of social isolation, this Holy Festival is about touching each other. It's about throwing color at each other, throwing water at each other. It's a very colorful festival, and we love to dance in this festival. We love to drink in this festival, So we do have it.
And Shelley, there was another one, now I forgot the name, but I went to it around the area of Hospital das Clínicas. I went to this festival maybe 3 years ago with 2 friends of mine, but I forgot what it's called now. But,
are you talking about Diwali?
What is it called?
Diwali?
That's it, yes. Yes.
Yeah, Diwali is to Indians what Christmas is to Brazilians. It's our most important festival of the year. It's a time when the Indians get together, families get together, we celebrate with lights. It's a festival of lights, and sweets.
Yes, but that was a lot of fun, and there was a lot of good food there too. And I'm definitely happy about all the good food it's gotten better. Yeah,
and Phil, I like to also bring to your attention the Indian Cultural Center we have here. It's called Centro Cultural de Swami Vivekananda. This center is near Paulista, and here we have yoga classes, we have dance classes, we have culinary classes, we have talks, we have guest lectures, we have everything Indian here. So this is a must visit place for everybody, and everything is free, but you just have to register on time, because there are limited seats.
Okay, so can you just repeat the name again? Because that was a mouthful.
Yeah, this name is a bit tricky to pronounce. Centro Cultural de Swami Vivekananda.
Okay, so what you can do is send me all of this stuff and I'll put it down in the description of the video so people can check it out. Because
But it's also easy to find this center by the name of Centro Cultural da Índia. Its
one
name was
Google.
changed only last year. Yeah, Centro Cultural da Índia. It's mais fácil, né?
That's much easier. That's much easier.
Yeah.
Well, Shelley, I do want to get to the expat quiz because everybody that comes on this show has to play the expat quiz. But we had scheduled to talk a little bit about any Brazilian authors that you think are important, since you do work with literature and poetry. So can you just give us like a quick recommendation of an author that you think some expats should get into that really relate a lot of Brazil?
Yeah, definitely. I think Monteiro Lobato is a very, very important Brazilian author who is very popular in Brazil. He's a household name outside Brazil. I'm sure all expats, I got to know about Monteiro Lobato after I got to know about his characters. When you go to a supermarket, you see Dona Benta. Dona Benta could be a name of a bread. It could be a name of a bakery shop. Is a name of a floor. Right? So Dona Benta is actually a character from Monteiro Lobato's works. So he's a very important author. He died in 1948. And, when we talk about Brazilian literature, this literature is very specifically not about arts for art's sake. It's about arts for some purpose, Brazilian literature is something that is a kind of a tool to forge a Brazilian identity, which is not just, a Portugal left behind, but it is much more than that, So Monteiro Lobato, I would say why I recommend that people read Monteiro Lobato's adaptations of many English works and translations and his own children's stories, because so through these works, you would really have the idea of the rubric, the fabric of the Brazilian society and the political and the national and the social identity of Brazil and how it developed over the years. So, in fact, I got to know about Monteiro Lobato, the writer, through Professor John Milton in University of São Paulo, who works with translation. And, he told me that Monteiro Lobato, he tried to market his work, O Presidente Negro, a science fiction, in outside Brazil. But if Monteiro Lobato had actually, instead of a Presidente Negro, if he had actually tried to market his other books, like especially children's stories outside Brazil, then his characters like, Pedrinho, Narzinho, they would have been more popular than we have Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck today. So I would suggest that Monteiro Lobato is a very important author and everyone must read that. He brought about a reading culture in Brazil through his press and through his works.
Let me just real quick before we move on from him, because I remember seeing those books around when I was little, because for those of you that don't know already, I was born here. I just grew up in the United States. So I know his Sítio do Pica-Pau is the most famous work, right?
Yeah. It's actually right. It's a real sitio, and you could go there. It's owned by somebody else now. That's where he wrote a lot of works.
But yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Are there any work by him, any books by him that are more for adults?
They are, like, for example, Urupus. So this is about the rural lives in the backlands of the São Paulo state of São Paulo. It was published in 1980. Even the O Presidente Negro is not for kids; it's also work for adult people, for adults.
That's cool.
But I think his children stories are more important and more beautiful, and it's just not for children; they're also for adults, because Dona Benta, she's a grandmother, and through Dona Benta, he criticizes the Catholic Church, the Spanish and Portuguese colonization of Brazil, the dictatorship, etc., etc. So even his children's books, if you read them as an adult, you would actually begin to appreciate the messages of the book.
It's one of those things, it's like Dr. Seuss. You can appreciate the subversiveness of Dr. Seuss more as an adult than you do as a kid.
Yes. I totally agree.
It's one of those types of authors. All right. Shelley, now you've come to my favorite part of the show because I get to put you on the spot. I love putting my guests on the spot.
Okay.
And it's the Expat Quiz. I'm going to ask you some questions. Don't think too hard about them. Just say the first thing that comes to mind, and you'll do fine, okay? So question number one is, what is the best thing about Brazil?
It's people, because they are very welcoming, very warm. they're very full of love and life.
And what is the worst thing about Brazil?
That's a hard question. I'm so much in love with this place that it's very difficult for me to say what's the worst thing about Brazil. Okay, the crime, yes, the crime, especially in Rio de Janeiro.
Yes, the crime is terrible. What is your favorite food in Brazil?
I'm a vegetarian, and my favorite here are the salads in Brazil. Oh, yummy, awesome.
They are good.
I like lasagna also. Lasagna and a little bit of gnocchi also, yeah.
But the fruits and vegetables here are so fresh. I mean,
They are.
At least compared to America, I don't know how it is compared to India.
In India as well, it is. I mean, I love fruits. In fact, after coming to Brazil, I've begun to take care of myself through eating good fruits, boiled vegetables, very nice vegetables, fresh. I love the food here. It's really nice. I'm a vegetarian, but I have no problems with food here. People have problems like Indians. Oh, there's no vegetarian food, but there are amazing vegetables here.
Yes, I agree with you. And what's your least favorite food down here?
Least favorite food. I don't like the feijão here.
Oh, the beans.
Beans. Yeah, because I make my beans in Indian way, and that's more delicious to me.
Are the Indian beans a little meatier, a little beefier than the ones here? Because that's my main issue with the beans here compared to the American beans. The American beans are very, they're full, they're meaty.
Yeah, the Indian beans are actually, we use the red beans in India, and we have them here, but I use the black beans also the same way. It's just my way of cooking. So my beans are a bit more spicy. I put a bit more spice in that. So that's the only difference,
Surprise. You use spice in your food. I can only imagine how much Indian people suffer in Brazil, because Brazilians don't like spice very much.
They don't. But to be honest, I don't like too much of spice. I like mild spice. So, but my beans are definitely more spicy than Brazilians can't eat my beans for sure.
Oh, I know. I can imagine. And what's your favorite drink down here? What do you think is the best Brazilian drink?
Caipirinha.
Caipirinha. Oh, yes.
No two doubts about it. Come on, it has to be caipirinha.
Do you like the flavored caipirinhas or just the old traditional ones?
I like the caipirinha with strawberries, moringa, strawberries.
That's very nice.
The red caipirinha.
Yeah, because I know my sister, she's a fan of a lot of these caipirinhas, but she likes the flavored ones. And she likes the batidas, which I think has, what is it? Doce de leite. Yeah.
Oh, that's too sweet.
I know, it's a little too sweet for me, but, it's popular here. Doce de leite is in everything. That's the invasion. That's another thing that invades your life is doce de leite. Now, you've traveled a bit around Brazil, so what's the best place to visit in Brazil? The best place you've been?
Morro de São Paulo. Beautiful, man. Beautiful place.
Where is that?
It's Salvador. It's an island that you go to Salvador. You take the boat ride. It's an island, and we have natural swimming pools there. That's where I did my first sea diving. It was very beautiful, that island.
Morro de São Paulo. And what do you think is the most overrated place or thing in Brazil? Most overrated?
Overrated. I think. Let me think. I think people here complain a lot about traffic. To me, their complaint is overrated. You know why?
Why?
Because it's worse in India. I would tell all my Brazilian friends to go live in India for a year. When they come back, they'll stop complaining about these things.
I imagine you were going to say that.
Tudo garrafada, não dá para. É muito trânsito. Por favor, go to India, live there for a year. You come back and you'll stop complaining.
Yeah, I imagine you were going to say that only from what I've seen in movies and some news programs. It looks, I would be afraid just to walk. It looks pretty intense.
It's quite mad there, yeah. Sometimes no traffic.
Let's see. Okay, now thinking about São Paulo, best place to visit here in São Paulo, in your city of São Paulo.
It's Bico do Batman. It has to be Bico do Batman. The open sky theater, the Open Sky Art Gallery. It's so beautiful, man.
And can you just explain a little for those that don't know what Biko the Batchman is?
Oh, okay. Biko the Batman is I think just 100-meter long street where we have the best graffiti in Brazil. Graffiti is actually, graffiti is banned in many places, but this particular street, graffiti is legally allowed, so it has brought a lot of respect to the graffiti artists. And in this street, we have hundreds of graffitis, and it's done by very famous graffiti artists from Brazil. And every 3 months, 4 months, they keep changing it. They keep redoing the graffiti. There's one graffiti which is from the DC Comics, of Batman, after which the street is called Biko the Batman. And that is from the 70s. It is still there, and they keep redoing that graffiti. And actually, if you go there, it's a very bohemian feel there. You can just grab a beer, cerveja, you can just, you can have it, and you would just sit down there and just enjoy the culture, enjoy the street art. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I love that place.
Guys, Shelley is helping me a little bit because she's giving a promo for a future podcast, and she didn't even know it, because I'm actually going to talk to two people down here in Brazil who are experts on graffiti and street art and murals. So we will be talking a whole lot about that in the future. So thank you, Shelley. And we're almost done over here. We're almost done. What's your favorite Brazilian singer, or could be a band, singer or band?
Actually, I like forró. I can't name any particular singer.
Woman after my own heart. I love forró too.
Yeah, I also like forró because I was learning forró before the pandemic. I was learning it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love the forró music, the song, the instrument they play. It's beautiful.
Very cool. Oh, I love forró. And Shelley, you're doing my work for me, because guys, I just put out a 2-hour-long forró playlist for Festa Junina, so look for that. I'll link it down in the comments. I absolutely love forró. It's such a good dance to dance to. And last question, you're doing a really good job, by the way, is any advice or warning that you would give to people thinking about coming to Brazil?
Okay, guys, if you're coming to Brazil, the first thing, in fact, if you go to any other place, it's not Brazil, the first thing is safety. You've got to be safe. And when you talk about safety, what you have to really avoid in Brazil is like being flashy, wearing this very expensive sunglasses or watches. So once you know that you're not flashy, you are humble, you're down to earth, you don't need to worry anything, And well, this also parameter, I would say, if you're going to some places like in Rio de Janeiro, especially in the evenings. So that is one first thing that I would tell you. And second, I tell you please come here with a very open heart and open mind. Brazilians are very welcoming people. Even if you can't speak their language, they can't speak your language, they will still try to help you, to understand you, to take you through the places you want to go to. So that's very important. I think I would have these two things to say. There's a lot more I can say, but I think it's sufficient.
No, it's fine. That's great advice, guys. Brazil is still a developing country, so you have to just be aware of those things. But I think it's important, Shelley, just so we don't end on too much of a down note, is that if you're smart, if you're, relatively street smart, you should be okay. I mean, things happen. You can't, it is what it is. But for the most part, if you're just smart, you know where you're going, you know where you have to be, you're not flashing like crazy, you'll be fine. You can fit in. You don't have to live your life here especially, I can't talk about all of Brazil, but especially São Paulo. It's kind of relatively safe compared to the rest of Brazil. There's
Very
definitely
safe.
areas that are more dangerous than others, Go ahead.
I said I've never felt unsafe in São Paulo even for a second in these last 11 years that I've lived here. Not even for a single second I felt unsafe in São Paulo. Never.
Yeah, well, there you go. She's saying it like it is, guys, and I sort of feel the same. I have, but then again, I travel all over São Paulo, so I've been to some places that are a little bit more dangerous, and that's why I felt unsafe. But if you're just living your life, doing your thing, you will be fine. You'll be all right. Shelley, thank you so much. You promised me an hour. We went a little bit over, so I know you're tired. I know I'm tired. I got to get up at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
No.
But it was
Okay.
so great to have you on. Guys, please, if you want to contact Shelly, her email is there if you want more information about Tibetan poetry, poetry in general, Indian culture in Sao Paulo. I'll link a whole bunch of stuff down in the comments so that you can also find out where these things are happening. And any last words before we go, Shelly?
I just want to thank you, Phil, for this wonderful opportunity. You feeling sleepy, but I'm quite energized after this talk. So I think you're doing some great work at this podcast. So please keep doing that. It's the first time that I hear of a journal for expats, and it's very important. I look forward to hearing other expats through your platform. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the listeners, to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Until next time. Thank you for listening to the Brazil Expat Journal, the BJ you can trust. Next week, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do, but I may go live because I want to talk a little bit about some things that I love about this country we call Brazil. So look out for that, and also look out for new interviews coming soon, including one with some guys that know a whole lot about the Brazilian street art culture. That'll be a really interesting one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that little bell so you know when new episodes are up, and also share this video if you think it will be interesting to someone else. Much love to you guys. Until next time.